Podcast. I'm Ted Lilly, President of the Taxpayers League.
And I'm Margaret Martine, Research Director of the Taxpayers League.
Well, Margaret, session is completed. We are done with the regular session. Of course, there might be a special session. The legislature had 77 days to get things done. They started on March 8th and went through May 23rd, midnight of actually the 22nd. So May 23rd was when it had to be complete. A lot of fiasco, a lot of craziness at the end of the session, as happens frequently, but this one seemed special, seemed bizarre. Big four that we've talked about, the bonding bill did not happen. It lost by a breath. Almost passed.
Well, not for want of trying, right? I mean, the Senate tried to pass one, failed. The House tried to pass one, failed. Do so, not enough votes in either body because it takes a 3/5 vote on a bonding bill. And then in the last few seconds, the House passed a bonding bill, sent it to the Senate, and then all hell broke loose.
literally.
Yeah.
And in a couple minutes here, we will play back what happened at the end of the session in the Senate. So we actually have video and audio of the last few seconds here of the session.
Yes, if you're listening to this on a podcast, you won't actually see it, but we will describe what's happening, and you can certainly watch the video in the video version. We'll have that video as part of the podcast.
But with that bonding bill, it actually did pass. The bill did pass in the House. And again, Margaret, as you stated, there was a bill in the Senate, a bonding bill earlier, and that failed by one vote.
Right.
And then a bill was presented in the House also that did not pass.
Right.
And then there was agreement that was reached, and the bill was much higher than what we would like to see. The dollar amount is much more than we'd like to see. I think it was $990 million.
Yep.
But that being said, there was a lot of the basic type of programs, investments that the Taxpayers League supports. Water systems, investment in roads, bridges, investment in existing buildings.
Yes, it was a very large bonding bill, but of the percentage of things that was in it, it actually did focus mainly on infrastructure and roads. So our first test was we would really prefer not to see a bonding bill this year since we had one last year. Even if it's a bonding year, we bond every single year. And that's not the way that sessions were designed. It was supposed to be bond every other year. But now that we do it every year, we could say that last year there were priorities funded. This year, the big year for bonding, there's a lot of stuff in the bonding bill that's, we could still say is not priorities, but they were political priorities, shall we say. But overall, that bonding bill had a larger share than usual of infrastructure projects because the House Republicans who, in the bill starting our House, at least that's where the direction comes from usually, is from the House to start the bonding bill. That's what they heard people loud and clear saying. No new stuff. Fix roads and bridges, fix existing capital assets that we have, no new stuff.
And no trains.
No trains.
That was the killer in this case.
Right.
But again, when you hear in the media that there was no bonding bill, remember that this is during a biennium and a 2-year period of time. And last year, in the budget year, they passed $373 million of bonding bill plus another 150 or so that was spent on capital projects from the general fund, from general spending. So we did $500 million of bonding during this biennium, even if this didn't happen. And the normal bonding, at the top is about $1 billion. So it's not that we didn't do bonding during this legislative biennium. Actually, we did at least half of what normally happens.
Right.
But in the end, it was light rail that killed it. It was a crazy situation. So,
that's right.
So the House passed this bill, and again, it was $990 million. Of that, about $700 million of it was transportation, roads and bridges projects. But they passed it at about 11:45 of the deadline night. But they got it done.
Right, and they had to have some poor page grab the bonding bill, big thick thing, and then run it over, not to the Senate chamber like they usually do, right? Because when they've had these, it always comes down to the wire, and they always send a page to run to the Senate chamber, which is just across the building from the House. This time, they had to run across the street.
Well, through the tunnels. But,
Yes.
but the building is across the street, absolutely.
Right, they had to run across the street because the Senate's meeting over there because of the renovation. So.
But the Senate was waiting with bated breath for that bill to come.
Exactly.
And it came about 10-15 minutes before the end of session.
Right.
And there was plenty of time to pass it.
Well, in fact, they
complete
did
it.
vote on it. They
Yes.
voted on it, but they also
But they made an amendment.
they made an
And-
amendment to it. Exactly.
And this amendment was basically a light rail funding, right?
Yeah, it was actually. It's very interesting. It was quite a small amendment, actually. It's not some gigantic thing. It was just changing the ability of a railroad authority, in this case would be Hennepin County Railroad Authority, to basically raising its debt limit, I think, right? Right, and how much it can contribute to light rail.
Right.
Because it has a limit of 10% of the project that it can contribute. They wanted to raise it to 20%. And so in a lot of ways, this was kind of enabling the Hennepin County to contribute more, thus potentially placing, because they'd have to do it, most likely placing more of the burden of funding Southwest Light Rail on Hennepin County taxpayers.
Right. Well, and taking away some of the control of the state.
Yes.
So basically, it was Senator Latz that put the amendment forward, and the amendment is the only thing it changes. It's from 10 to 20%. Capital costs. A county regional railroad authority may not contribute more than 10%, was the old, 20% was the amendment,
Right.
of the capital cost of a light rail transit or commuter rail project. So what happened is, for Southwest Corridor to go forward and to get the federal funding match that they keep talking about, a certain amount of money has to be raised in the local area. And,
Right.
and part of that is the county, part of it is CTIB, part of it is the Met Council,
Yeah,
part of it is
CTIB
the state.
is actually all the counties in the 7-county metro, except for a couple, I think.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
that opted out.
But part of that is the state. I think they needed $370 million locally committed in order to get the match.
Right.
So what this is the House Republicans were saying no light rail funding. There was no light rail funding in the bill, in the budget bill, or in the bonding bill. So this is a way to try to reach that level, that threshold,
Yep.
without having it have to go through the House. So here we are, 10 minutes to go, and Senator Latz puts forward this amendment.
Yes.
And
Now that's what the journal shows us, right? That's
Yes.
what it says on paper, and that was the process as it went forward in the formal sense, right?
right,
But if you look at the video, it's a lot more wild and woolly than that.
exactly. And Senator Terry Bonhoff, who's running against Eric Paulson,
Yep.
she carried the water on this. She is the one that spoke up and frantically was trying to get this amendment passed. But in the end, what happens in the tape that we're about to see is that because the House passed the bonding bill and sent it to the Senate
Right.
with 10 minutes to go, the Senate played around with this and added an amendment. And because they changed the bill, then the bill would have to go back to the House to pass. And in the meantime, the House retired for the year. They sine die.
Yeah, they adjourned sine die, which means that the session is over
For them.
for them.
So once the Senate realizes that the House is not there, this amendment that the Senate passed has to be withdrawn because they can't go back to the House to pass the bill. So it's either get the bonding bill through or not. And now they tried to frantically remove the amendment, which they ran out of time. The clock ran out on them. And finally, even though Senator Pappas
Who's the president of the Senate?
is trying to get this done and doesn't understand the
Yep.
situation,
Yep.
because of that, Senator Bach, the majority leader, ends up saying the session is over, we didn't get this done.
Right. Although he didn't adjourn sine die, he just adjourned.
Well, he adjourned for the day.
Yep.
They had retirement speeches that they wanted to do in the
Well, yeah,
Senate
because
the
they
following
can
day.
actually meet. They just can't pass any laws.
pass any
So
bills.
they did the sine die the next day after the retirements.
Where the House did sine die and then stayed in session to do some retirement speeches.
Right.
Some unofficial business.
Yep.
Well, let's watch this tape. This is really interesting, and pay attention because this is the truth of what happened at the end of the session.
Right.
Thank you, Madam President. House File 622 is...
Certainly doesn't seem to be the urgency that there was in the House to get this
which
done.
had a little
They
bit
seem
of a
rather relaxed.
illustrious,
Yeah, well, you could see the people around Stump here.
members, I just
They're a little nervous. They're like, hurry it up.
point out on the spreadsheet, and there's a lot of paper on your desk, I know, but if you look if you look at, the spreadsheet, you have,
By the way, this is a
certain
60-page
columns that,
document that the senators are just receiving now.
Right.
60 pages.
Yep.
in the Senate, and, there's a lot of good projects in this, that, that we have, and obviously there's some that we wish were in here. So I would ask that you, take a look at it.
See whose head just went by? Terry Bonoff. There she is.
There's Terry
All right, let's
Bonhoff.
stop this. Okay, so there she is in the background behind Senator Stumpf, and she's talking to him. And at first I thought, oh, she's just telling him to hurry up or something. But
No, she's telling him there's an amendment.
there's an amendment. Yeah, exactly.
Madam President, I have an amendment.
There we go.
Secretary, the amendment. Is it an oral amendment? We don't have an amendment at the desk.
Yeah, see, they don't even have it written out yet.
Senator Latz, has the amendment, Madam Chair.
Madam President.
Okay, so she says Latz has the amendment.
But she's obviously arranging this.
Yes.
Senator Stumpf was going
Bring it to the desk, please.
It's already been distributed to all the members, I understand. I believe the desk has it.
And remember, this is with 9 minutes left
Yeah.
to go in
Now, see,
session.
there's the staff there trying to say, is that the amendment? Is that the amendment? You know, where's the amendment? Is that it?
And the person in the back on the right is sitting there with her hand on her mouth like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. Are they really doing this?
Yeah.
Secretary will read the oral amendment.
Senator Latz moves to amend House File 622 as follows. Page blank, insert the following section in Article 3, Minnesota Statute, Section 398A10 is amended as follows.
No urgency whatsoever. Look at
Well,
this.
That's the Secretary of the Senate. She's-
Yeah, but regardless, Senator Pappas, I mean, in comparison to the House, they were frantically
Senator
working on getting this done.
That's true.
No urgency whatsoever.
To 20.
Almost like it's planned.
On Met Council's ability to fund.
Yeah, now listen to that. Did you hear what he just said? He said it's he actually misstated what was in the amendment. He
Yes.
said that it increases the Met Council's ability.
And this has nothing to do with the Met Council.
No, it has to do with
This is the
Hennepin County.
counties.
Yeah. Or a county authority, which in this case would be Hennepin County.
All those in favor of the amendment, say aye. Opposed, nay.
Yeah, this is brilliant.
Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I've already called the vote. All those
Division.
in favor of the amendment, please stand.
So they're counting now,
Yep. Meanwhile, yeah, clock is ticking.
and you notice the ones that are standing are in the back,
Yep.
the Democrats, mostly.
Yep.
I don't see any Republicans standing up.
No.
37 in
This-
favor, the motion prevails, the amendment is adopted.
Boom.
Is there any more discussion?
So now they've passed the amendment, it has to go back to the House.
Could you give us some explanation of what this?
So this is Senator
ability that
Fischbach.
we just
Right.
went on? How does that work with the, if we just got this from the House and obviously our time, I'm just concerned about procedure.
So
Senator
stop it here.
Latz.
Madam President.
Senator
Yikes.
Bonoff.
Madam,
So Senator Fischbach is pointing out, because she sat in Senator Pappas's chair at the front of the room there as
Yep.
president.
Yeah, she was president when the Republicans held
So
control.
so she knows, Fischbach knows that this has to go back to the House if if the Senate has passed an amendment to it.
Yep.
So she's pointing out, you've got 5 minutes left, how are you gonna get this done? You can't possibly get it done, are you trying to kill the bill, is basically what Senator Fischbach is asking.
That's right.
So now here's where Senator Bonhoff stands up and defends this bill.
Yeah, so Senator Bonoff has just been recognized and is speaking.
President, Senator Fischbach, right now, the County Regional Railroad Authority can only contribute 10% of the capital cost for a project. We did not.
She's missing the point.
Senator Fischbach.
Yeah.
Madam President, I asked about the procedure, how this affects the bill and how it's going to proceed.
Senator Fischbach, I believe the bill has to go back to the House then for final approval. Is there any other discussion? Secretary will give House File 622 its third reading.
Now the fun
House
begins.
File number 622, a bill for an act relating to capital investment.
Now the fun begins. Now
Yeah.
they
The
realize
Secretary will take the roll.
Yep. To
All
go
members
back.
having voted, the secretary
See?
will close the roll. Are there any other bills? Senator Bach. Messages from the House. The secretary will read the message.
Madam President, I have the honor to announce the passage by the House of the following House file herewith
Okay.
transmitted. House File Number 3980,
Well, let's
a bill
eliminate
for an
this
act
part.
relating to legislative enactments.
Oh, this is the
Signed,
reviser bill,
Chief
which is
Clerk,
usually the
House of
last bill when
Representatives.
things are not like crazy.
House File
And so-
3980 will be given its first reading.
This is
Senator
just,
Bach.
this is just the,
Madam President,
Technical
I
bill.
move that an urgency be declared within the meaning of Article 4, Section 19 of the Constitution of Minnesota with respect to House File 3980, and that the rules of the Senate be so far suspended.
the reason why they have to do this is because they can't, they're not supposed to be passing bills this fast. They're supposed to be giving it time between
Opposed, nay.
the second and
Motion
third reading
prevails.
for discussion.
So House File 3980 is given its second reading.
Boom.
Senator Latz.
Madam President, this is the technical corrections revisers bill. Cleans up the mistakes that were made in drafting bills during the session. It's regular to do it, and I appreciate your support.
I think there'll be a
Is there
few
any
more
other
to do
discussion?
next session.
Yes.
House File 3980, its third reading.
House File Number 3980, a bill for an act
This is when they find out, I think. See, look at that. She's like saying, hurry up. Look at this. This is when they're
So
not.
somebody came over to tell them that the house is,
Yeah, the house
It's
is
done.
side-eye. So all the staff are like, what's going on? What are we doing here?
House File Number 3980, a bill for an act relating to legislative enactments.
Secretary will take the roll.
No, I don't think that the president, Sandy Pappas, knows yet. But I think the president of the Senate and her assistant know. Because they were just handed the paper, probably, that said that they'd sine-died over in the House. While the board is up and they're voting, I think that's when she finds out.
Madam President, can I read? We're in the middle of a roll call.
And somebody on the floor is trying to get her attention to say, hey. And she says, shut up,
All members having voted,
we're doing a roll call.
Secretary will close the roll. There being 63 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to.
Okay.
Madam President?
Senator Bach, Senator Benson.
Madam President, I'd like to move to reconsider House File. The
so this
bonding
is our
bill that House
Republican
was
Senator
sine-die.
Benson.
And
Yep.
if we remove the amendment that was added, Madam President, we can move a bonding bill off this floor.
Trying to help the Democrats figure out what happened with the
I would like
bonding bill,
to move to reconsider.
On the motion
because the
to
Democrats don't
reconsider,
understand yet.
Yep.
Roll call, Madam President.
Roll call has been requested on the motion to reconsider House File 2749. Secretary will take the roll.
Oh, they got the number wrong. That was the reviser bill, I think, wasn't
Yes,
it?
yes.
It was the last thing in the pipeline, so she screwed up. So the reconsidering the reviser bill. Oh, look at that. Isn't that?
Did I read the wrong name?
Yeah, they're reconsidering the reviser bill by mistake because that was the last bill they had. So I'm not even
it-
sure that they passed the reviser bill if they reconsidered it and knocked it down. So,
And again, the clock is ticking, the clock is running out here.
yep. Oh no, they are passing the reviser bill. Okay, that's good. Repassing it.
I misstated the bonding bill. It's House File 622.
Oops.
Oops.
The bonding. This is, it says the last bill is up here.
Nobody knows what they're voting on,
Or at least
including the president.
the desk, yeah, is completely confused because they're like, we just voted to reconsider the reviser bill.
Madam President,
Senator Benson.
I'd like to move to reconsider the last amendment to House File 622.
Ah, she's got it.
To reconsider,
The amendment made to House File 622. Senator Latz made an amendment.
But they're in the middle of a vote.
on the motion to reconsider,
They're in a roll
Okay.
call, they're in a vote.
We are now reconsidering the bill.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there's a roll call to reconsider the bill, House File 622. Secretary will take the roll.
Okay, all
But
right.
they'd never stopped the last one.
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
this is unbelievable.
Because they asked for a roll call.
This is unbelievable.
Yep,
They never finished the other one, now they're into a new one. This is the motion to reconsider.
yep.
So they have to vote to reconsider it, and then vote on removing the amendment, and then pass the bill. Those are the three steps that are
Secretary will
left.
close the roll.
There we go.
There being 50 ayes and 13 nays, the motion prevails, the bill will be reconsidered. On the motion, Senator
Madam
Benson.
President, I move that we reconsider the amendment made to House File 622, to strike the amendment to 622.
On the motion to reconsider the amendment to House File 622, it was to strike the 10 and insert 20 on that motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The amendment is being reconsidered. Well, now we have to
Madam,
he has to withdraw the
let's vote
amendment.
on. Madam President, I move we vote.
Senator
on-
Benson.
President, I move we adjourn sine die.
Oh,
Ah. Is that in rest? Sounds like her.
so in other words, the Senate
The motion
DFL
before the
didn't want to
body,
finish this bonding bill.
I withdraw the motion.
The
That
Oh,
is-
she withdrew it.
before the
That is
body to
unrest.
reconsider
Yes.
the amendment.
Democrat.
So the amendment is before us.
So again, the Democrats would rather quit than have a bonding bill that didn't have funding for Southwest Light Rail.
Until Monday, May 23rd, 11 a.m.
Yep, and that's when he turns out.
On the motion to adjourn, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The Senate stands adjourned.
Boom.
Wow.
Yep. Well, yeah, the Ann Rest, I think, Ann Rest is one of these people, kind of like Phyllis Kahn, obviously very solid Democrat, long tenure in the body. I think what she was trying to do was, it was after midnight. What they were doing was illegal. And I think Ann Rest was probably offended by that part of it, although she was convinced to stand down. But she didn't want them trying to pass bills after midnight because she knew that they would be challenged and they were illegal.
Yes. Someone from the floor, I did not hear it in this, but I heard it on the TV the night that this happened.
Yeah.
Somebody from the floor said, "Cover the clock, cover the clock."
Well, really?
Yes.
Because I thought didn't they handle that? Because before they did that, I think that was a joke, right? Because they did that in the past. That was actually something they used to do, and now I think it's in statute that they can no longer do
cannot
that.
it. Okay, well, somebody was saying that from the floor, so that's interesting. But anyway, so here we are. We have a $1 billion bonding bill that was held hostage for a slight language change for Southwest Light Rail.
Yes, the purpose was to do something for Southwest Light Rail.
Yes.
Anything.
Yes. So there are two things here that I think are interesting. One, strategically, I'm speaking. The House somehow knew what was going on in the Senate with passing this amendment and that it would have to come back to them. And before that happened, they quit for the year. They
Right.
went sine die. So that kind of stuck it to the Senate, basically. On the other hand, I think, watching this tape again, that Senator Latz and Senator Bach sit next to each other. They're seatmates.
Okay.
And I think that there's a high likelihood that this was planned. That Senator Bach and Governor Dayton had decided that they were not satisfied with the final negotiations for this session. And that they would rather go out without a bonding bill than pass the bonding bill that gave roads and bridges without the rail, without the support for light rail.
Right.
I think this was planned. I think they planned this out and did this to stick it to the Republicans and stick it to the House. And stick it to you. Stick it to
The
everybody.
taxpayer. That's right. So that, well, and really stick it to the Republicans because that was the one thing they said they could not do. That Speaker Dowd said that he didn't have the votes in his caucus for Southwest Light Rail. But by sneaking this in there, even though it's not a complete capitulation, you know, it's allowing something to happen in order to let Southwest Light Rail happen, it would still be a serious political victory on their part to be
Yes.
able to get that across and make Doubt look foolish to his caucus, holding the entire rest of the bonding bill hostage, because if they had had the time, and if this House had not adjourned sine die, it would have been flopped back
First.
over to them, and they would have had to make a decision in mere minutes, seconds really,
Yes.
to do it. And then all the chaos that we saw last session that was in the House, it would have been on the House too. And the narrative would have been, look at the House, they're all screwed up or whatever. Right now, they don't actually they can't point to the House's procedure at the end to being chaotic.
Right.
They can try, but it's only if you ignore all the nonsense that happened in the Senate. I mean, they didn't even have the right number of the bill. They were trying to reconsider the revisor technical bill because they didn't even know, you know, what they were doing.
Astounding video. Just
It really
craziness.
is. It really is.
On the basis, there's a lot more to this also. On the basis, the Senate and the House had 9 minutes to review a 60-page bonding bill.
Yep.
Now, that's not to say that they didn't have pieces of the bonding bill throughout time.
Right now, because they've both passed 2 bonding bills and they were
Right.
familiar with a lot of the provisions in them.
A lot of the provisions, but regardless,
You want to know what's in it, though.
9 minutes.
What's in it and what's not in it.
Nobody knows what was added, what was taken out, any of that kind of thing, and
Right.
they had to vote on it in 9
Yeah, well,
minutes.
Stump, you can tell he's kind of flustered because he's like, well, this is a good bill, and you're going to notice there's some stuff in it, and there's some stuff that didn't make it. And if I'm a senator, I'm scratching my head, especially if I had something that I thought was in it. I want to know if it's in it.
Right.
So, I mean,
And truth be told, I don't think Stump knew everything that was in it.
yeah,
I mean, you could
he looked
almost
a little
tell.
confused. He hadn't gotten it back from the drafting, yeah.
The other thing is that they were trying to do amendments to it in the House and in the
Right.
Senate, and the computers were not keeping up.
Nope.
So the legislators couldn't even see what the amendments were.
Yeah, that was some of the confusion, right? That they
Mm-hmm.
couldn't, I mean, because the Senate, unlike the House, is now a largely electronic process, right?
Right.
Don't they get copies of the bills
Yes,
that
yes.
are actually electronic?
Yes.
Whereas the House is still very paper driven. And that was the decision was made quite a while ago. I don't know when, but I mean, I've always been fascinated to see senators all looking at their computer screens at the amendments as they come up, whereas the House, it's, you know, it's all paper. And so, yeah, so these senators were like, I can't get it, where is it? And so, yeah.
Right. And another takeaway is that the Republicans in the Senate were actually assisting the Democrats to try to figure this out at the end, trying to point out technically how to get this done. And in the end, the clock ran out.
Yep.
But what I'm fearful.
Well, they tried to go past the clock a little bit there.
Yes, they absolutely did. Well, let's talk about this bonding bill just from a perspective of the taxpayers. So we passed $373 million last year, plus another 150 in the general bill.
Yep.
And the principles that we put forward in our guide to the session earlier this year for the bonding bill were, number one, that we don't need a bonding bill this year. We have projected surplus, and we could spend more cash on essential capital projects to not incur more debt. And we had the big bonding bill last year.
Right.
So to that measure, we're in good shape right now, right?
Yep.
We don't have a bonding bill as it currently sits.
Yep.
We are okay as far as that. And by the way, we did spend $173 million in bonding last year on transportation. So that is there.
Right.
Number two, if we have a bonding bill, then let it be focused on core government functions like roads, bridges, water, existing buildings, things like that.
Right.
I think that this bonding bill that was put forward probably meets that to a large extent.
Yeah, I think that, you know, one of the issues with bonding, and it's kind of interesting, some of our folks that certainly we have looked at this whole idea of omnibus bills and just stuffing a bunch of stuff, you know, in a bill to get it passed. Bonding is probably the best example of that, right? Because you get projects that are absolutely, everybody agrees this is something that the state should pay for, even indebt itself for over time. But there are other things in it don't raise to that level.
Right.
But you need them in there because otherwise XYZ, you know, representatives or senators won't vote for the bill because that's their price for voting for the bill. And I don't know so much about Minnesota, but in Congress, before we had big omnibus bills, we had a practice that was called log rolling. And log rolling is essentially when you promise your vote for some other, you switch votes with somebody. You say, I'll vote for your thing if you vote for my thing. And so I think if bonding, it's always going to be that way. Even if it's all not in one bill, it'll still be a practice where people are saying, well, I have a project for my district, so if you vote for that, I'll vote for the project in your district. It just happens in the context of a single bill, and so it's a lot less transparent.
So in
So
other
anyway,
words,
the bonding bill often comes down to that. It's ugly and it's messy, and it often leads to an outcome where we're getting a lot of junk to get a few things that are really important.
and that's wrong. I mean, we shouldn't be
Right.
spending, okay, so Speaker Doubt and Majority Leader Pepin and others are going around saying we need a special session to pass the bonding bill.
Right.
To get this done. And frankly, from the Taxpayers League perspective on the bonding situation, we have spent enough. It's more than we have. It's more than we should be asking for you to spend on your government. We want you to have your own money, not giving more of it to the government. And we think we've spent enough. But Speaker Doubt and they're going around talking about that we needed some of these transportation projects. And by the way, we agree with that.
Yep.
Highway 14 between Mankato and Owatonna has a high death rate. Highway 12
Yes.
west of the metro
Yeah,
has a high death rate.
They had a press conference yesterday. Representative Hertas and Speaker Doubt and Majority Leader Pepin went out to Belle Plaine, I think it was, and went and had a press conference about that, about the deaths on Highway 12.
Right.
And this Memorial Day weekend, you can bet if there's, God forbid, an accident somewhere, it's going to be.
It will be there.
It'll be
on
in
the news.
Yeah, it'll be on the news, and bonding and the failure of the bonding bill is going to be traced back to that.
But the point of that is this log rolling that Margaret was referring to. If it costs $50 million to fix those two highways, then we shouldn't have to spend $1 billion or $1.5 billion,
Right.
$1.5 billion to fix a $50 million problem.
Right.
By including all this other stuff just so we can get enough votes to fix our top priorities.
Yes, and the statements that Governor Dayton has made, clearly that's what he's thinking. He's thinking, how much more can I get out of the Republicans if I have a special session that gives them the roads
Right.
the road fixes that they want.
Well, Governor Dayton has come out and said if there's a special session, then he wants transportation separated out from the rest of bonding.
Right.
What does that mean? Well, that means basically he wants his $1.5 billion bill,
Yep.
not the $900 million or $990.
Or even
that
worse,
was
I
gonna
mean,
pass.
when I was listening to the Senate debate, I think somebody and said, and this was in reference to Senator Stumpf being, a statesman or whatever, patting him on the back, saying, yeah, he really had a lot of work because he had $5.2 billion worth of requests. So they could have made a bonding bill 5 times the size, or maybe
Yes.
3 or 4 times the size at least of what they wanted, of all the requests that
The
they
needs
have.
are insatiable.
They are
You
insatiable.
can never meet all the needs that they say they have.
Right.
And they don't need it all. They know that they need to ask for a lot to get a little bit.
Yes, well, not even a little bit. They ask for a lot and they get like a lot of what they want, but not the things that are the most egregious that they just can't make a case for.
Well, and Governor Dayton is squawking about that we didn't put enough into the University of Minnesota. Well, in the last year bonding bill, we put $27 million into the U of M additionally into capital investments. We put $32 million into MnSCU. We put $25 million into additional flood mitigation. We put $2 million into Superfund drinking water.
Yeah,
programs.
last year's bonding bill.
We did $26 million for disaster relief.
Yeah,
I mean,
last
they
year-
did a lot.
Yeah, last year's bonding bill had a lot of projects that were deemed urgent. And so it seems incredible. I mean, it's possible, but it seems incredible that we would have urgent projects that have been waiting for so long, over, such a long period of time, that they have to be done right now, this second, or all hell breaks loose. I mean, everything is urgent. Everything is an emergency.
Yes.
They ratchet up the urgency of all of these things in order to get them over the threshold legislatively.
Right.
And it's clear that politically speaking, your 14 and your 12 highways, they've been put on the back burner, but that's because of politics. It's not because somebody didn't think they were important. It was because somebody didn't prioritize.
And And it's not like transportation construction is not happening. I've had the opportunity in the last week to drive
It
to
took
Duluth.
me like 20
I
minutes
drove
longer to
Roch-
get here.
I drove to Duluth. I drove to Rochester. I've driven around the Twin Cities.
Yeah.
Every place I go, there's construction happening on the
Yeah,
roads.
NPR has a great chart. I'll have to put it up. It basically shows all the construction in the Twin Cities and how hampered you will be just trying to get around in the next couple of months. So even if they got, and that's another thing, is that I was arguing with some Democrat on Facebook about this, regardless of how the bonding bill, because they were saying that the bonding bill was very hastily put together, there are mistakes. It's like, do you think that the second a bonding bill is passed, that the bonds are let? No. I mean, it's like they know, for one thing, if they just dump a bunch of bonds on the market, that's bad. So they parcel these things out over time. So whatever they are doing now in bonding, in a bonding bill, that's not going to be another 6 months, maybe even a year down the road until they get that funding set up. Now they can start a few things before the money actually comes in from the bonds, because they have a fund for this, and they expect those funds to come in later. But the actual bonding process is a lot longer and more complicated, and is basically a bunch of green eye shade guys over at MMB that set it all up to get it ready for the bonding houses. So that's a slow process, the actual,
Yes.
funding part
the
of it.
letting of the funds, yes.
Yeah, so, and then also, hopefully, usually Minnesota's got a pretty good credit rating, and so usually their bonds don't have any problems in the bond sales. But we don't even know what's going to happen a year, 6 months out in terms of the bond market. So it's going to be interesting to see even how these things play out over time. But I've always been amazed at what a slow process it is. It's not like it's an instantaneous thing. So whatever they're doing now, is in the pipeline. But if they do Highway 12 or Highway 14, even in the normal course of things, that's not going to happen for a few years.
Right.
Just
Exactly.
because, MnDOT has so many resources, and they're tied up right now, obviously, because we're congested everywhere with road work. Just throw a few more things on there. It's not going to happen instantaneously.
Right. The other takeaway that I just want to share, kind of wrapping this up, the Senate was out of control and didn't know what they were doing and were inept,
Right.
or knew what they were doing and they were conniving.
Yes.
It's one of those two things. I don't think there's anything in between.
Conniving?
Conniving.
The Senate Democrats?
I think this was planned. So it's one of those two things. But the last takeaway is, we spent $500 million last year on bonding, and it's as though it never happened. So if we spend $1 billion this year, you can bet that next year they'll come back when they're in session again, and they'll be talking about another bonding bill. Next year's a budget year, but they'll have to do some urgent things again next year for bonding. So it's just never enough. It's never enough. I mean, we spent $500 million during this biennium. That's half of what we normally spend.
That's right.
It's not like nothing happened. It's very frustrating.
Yes.
All right, well, transportation bill, the second of the top big four issues.
Right.
There was no transportation bill in
No, they struggled mightily to do something. It really was held hostage by the DFL and the Senate to get that light rail done. And yeah, there were different ways that they were thinking about doing it. There was doing it in bonding, doing it in the transportation bill through tab fees, and doing it through a gas tax. So two of those propositions, I guess you could say, that the Senate Democrats had were going to be in that transportation bill. And the Republicans in the House refused to budge on the gas tax. It was just no gas tax, no way, no how. So then there was this interesting discussion in the last week or so about tab fees. And Governor Dayton came out with his proposal, which would have massively hiked tab fees. Now this is the tab fees are the fees you pay, right, when you get your license renewed every year for your license plate renewed every year for your car, your registration. And so that massive increase would have impacted pretty much everybody, the guy with an old beater to the guy with the honkin' big, Escalade. And they had parceled it out in a way such that, the big car paid more, obviously, because they hate rich people, and they hate rich people with fancy cars. But even the little guy would have paid a significant increase, like a 50% increase?
Well, Governor Dayton's proposal was a 50% increase in tab fees
Yep.
for the first 5 years that you owned a vehicle.
Right.
Huge increase
Yeah.
in tab fees. And again, I mean, a middle income, middle class person might have a nice car. They might drive a nicer car than their house.
Yes.
And
Yes,
they're gonna-
actually, that's quite true in my neighborhood.
And they're going to end up paying a lot of money for that.
Yes.
But anyway, the governor's proposal was a 50% increase in the tab fees. The House came back and basically had about a 10%. Again, if you
Well-
look at over 5 years.
Yes, yeah, both sides, it was kind of weird because both sides had to publish these schedules of what you would
Yes.
be paying. And which was actually, in a way, it's kind of interesting because you could actually go and see, well, this is my car and see that. And the reporters, you could tell they were all doing that when this got announced at the House press conference because they were trying to figure out whether they were going to pay more individually, whereas Doubt was trying to explain it from the standpoint of a sort of depreciation schedule, how much you would pay over 10 years, right? 10 or 11 years, wasn't
Right,
it on his
right,
spreadsheet?
right.
And so, but people tend to focus at what would they pay right now, and then they go up a few years, and if they didn't see any kind of decrease or keep the same, they counted that as an increase.
Right.
So I don't think that really flew over very well. But it was,
Well,
the
in the
Republicans
House
did propose
schedule-
it.
In the House schedule, Margaret, the first year increase was $5. So
Well,
so it
except that they wanted to insert language that said that it was a hold harmless thing, that for the first year, you would not pay any more.
Right.
So that first year, even if it jumped up, you actually wouldn't pay it. So that's what they claimed they were going to do. But they never got there. I mean, they never,
It just didn't make sense.
It didn't make sense. And it
Well,
wasn't
and-
enough money to fund Southwest Light Rail. That was the other thing.
Well, in the
when
end,
you
though,
count the cash.
in the end, though, on the tab fees, any argument that it's not going to hurt that bad, which is what the House Republicans were trying to say,
Yes.
it still totaled $100 million of new revenue. So that money came from
Somewhere,
It
exactly.
comes from you. It comes from all of us.
Well, and tab fees are interesting. I mean, I've followed tab fees for a while just because it was a hot button issue when Jesse Ventura lowered tab fees considerably. It was people thought that was just great. People still remember that he did it. I mean, how many things can you remember, off the top of your head that some governor did? People remember the Jesse checks and they remember the tab fees. And so it's a kind of a populist thing to not raise tab fees, or the opposite is people will remember if you raised it. The other thing is and then we followed this a couple years ago. In fact, we even had it was a feature of our booth at the state fair when the legislature allowed counties to add a wheelage tax to their registration. And so it depends on what county you live in now, how much you actually pay for registration, whether you have those surcharges or not.
Right.
And so in the experience of some person who has a car, which is a lot of people, when they go and they have to write that check every year, or, in some cases you can use your credit card at some of these places, they know that has jumped up, and they don't necessarily know why or who is responsible. But if they hear that the tab fees are increasing yet again, then they can just blame government and say, why is my car, it used to only cost X to register my car, now suddenly it costs $20 more. And that, part of it will be because of the state, and part of it will be because of the wheelage tax. But in the end, it doesn't matter. All it matters is their car is costing them more to register.
Money out of your pocket.
Right, exactly.
It is money out of your pocket.
Right.
Well, Margaret, on the whole, again, going back to
Well, that, for one thing, that didn't pass. Let's make that
It did
clear.
not pass.
Yeah, it was a counteroffer by the Republicans to meet the governor's ridiculous tab fee increase, and they just crossed each other. They never came about.
And there was no comprehensive tax transportation bill.
No, they
that
got
was passed.
hung up on the funding of Southwest Light Rail and on how to pay for what they wanted to pay for.
Yep. So in our guide that we put out prior to the session,
Right.
We had two principles that we put forward for the transportation. Number one was no new gas tax, no increase in the existing gas tax at all.
Right.
I think we have to give the legislature credit. There is no new gas tax.
Yep.
Governor Dayton wanted 16 cents a gallon.
Yes.
He kept reducing that
Yeah.
as the end of session
That
got
was,
nearer and
in the
nearer.
Democrat House or Senate counteroffer when they were negotiating with the House Republicans. That was one thing that dropped, was the amount they wanted to tax.
Yes. And if there is a transportation comprehensive spending bill, that it was all on roads and bridges and not on transit.
Yeah, now the House Republicans were kind of interesting on this. They looked at a couple of projects in the transit area that they felt were okay, and they allowed those through. One was the Orange Line that goes, I think, south of the Twin Cities, and that's a bus line, rapid transit. So they thought that was okay because that made it a couple cuts in. And then the other thing they wanted to do was give more money to Greater Minnesota Transit.
Right.
And Greater Minnesota Transit is not trains, it's principally kind of these, granny buses that go to the local cities around there.
It's bus service, yeah.
It's bus service, but it's more like your Metro mobility, except
Right.
they don't have Metro. So they're going to like from town to town, that kind of thing.
Right.
So, yeah.
The other thing that we should point out in the transportation bill from the House is that there was no gold line in it in the end.
Yes.
The gold line is the Gateway Corridor.
Right.
Is that what they call it?
The Gateway Corridor, yeah.
Gateway Corridor. That comes from downtown
I know you're trying to
St.
blot
Paul.
that out of your mind, but
trying
that's
to
what it's
forget.
called.
We're doing our podcast here from Woodbury right now.
Yes.
But it goes from downtown St. Paul out to the Woodbury area, out towards Wisconsin.
Yep.
But there was no funding in that final transportation bill from the House. It
That's
was not there.
Yep. Well, it was a big ticket item. So
It was.
it didn't quite
So-
make the cut.
So from that thrust, looking at the transportation that was put forward, no new gas taxes and roads and bridges, not transit, I would say at least the House bill passed that threshold in
Right.
what they were putting forward. So
Right.
congratulations to Speaker Doubt and the House Republican caucus on that.
Yes. Well, I think that there were people in the caucus that were advocating for some of those things, which made his job particularly hard.
But in the end, Speaker Doubt came to many conventions, has been talking publicly,
Yep.
saying he will not have a gas tax, he will not support Southwest Light Rail.
Yep.
And he, at this point, has achieved that.
Yes, at this point.
At this point, exactly.
If Governor Dayton manages to open up another special session, I think we can all hold on to our wallets.
Well, and again, that is the fear. For crying out loud, here we are. We've passed a tax bill. We have a bonding bill from last session that funded half of what we normally do.
Right.
We don't have a transportation funding this year, but we spent $180 million last year on roads, additional spending. As a fiscally conservative citizen of the state of Minnesota, this is about as good as it gets
Yep.
right now, today. If
Yep.
we go back into special session, it only gets worse.
It only gets worse.
It-
Absolutely.
This is a bad deal
Yep.
going forward. We do not need a special session. And one of the advice that I would give to you as a listener of the podcast is to talk to your legislators. They're going back on this Memorial Day weekend to talk to the mayors, to talk to their county commissioners, to talk to the
Those
lobbyists.
guys probably want a special session.
They want the special session. They're pushing hard for a special session.
Yep.
Our legislators need to hear from you,
Yep.
from the average citizen, that no, we've done enough. We're satisfied.
Well, and if you live in one of those areas that has a big project like Highway 12 or Highway 14, ask yourself, is it worth it to get those projects done, which are typically in the neighborhood of, $15-20 million, to bond $1 billion or more to get those projects?
right.
And I guess, that's the question.
It's like saying, gosh, I've got a crack in my sidewalk, but to fix the sidewalk, I also have to build a whole new driveway and a road in front of my house.
That's right.
It just doesn't make sense. And by the way, I think that there will be an urgency next year, and you will see 14 and Highway 12. You'll see those projects completed.
Yes,
it'll
and
come.
it won't be that much faster than doing it this year. That's the
Right.
other issue too. Like I was talking about with how the bond process actually works, not how people think it works. It's not like the bonding bill passes and money rains from the skies to get
Yes.
these projects. It's basically a matter of making MnDOT prioritize,
Exactly.
which is, as you know, having been on the transportation committee, is a challenge.
Yes. So, all right, let's talk about the tax bill.
Right.
So there was a tax bill that did pass.
Yep.
In the House and
Yep.
in the Senate.
Yep.
It's on the governor's desk. The governor has 14 days to sign it, or he can veto it at any time. And if he does not sign it within 14 days of the end of session, then it does not become law. It's called a pocket veto. So that could happen. Basically, in the tax bill, there's some interesting things. There's some positive things here.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a $257 million bill of additional spending in government speak. But additional spending of government speak means giving taxes back. So there's a reduction in property taxes. There's local government aid of about $10 million to the counties. This is additional monies. This is, when I say that, I'm not saying only $10 million. It's an additional $10 million. Another $20 million that goes to LGA for cities. There's also business property tax cuts, and what this is the first $100,000 in commercial and industrial property values will be exempt from the state levies.
Yeah, that's actually a really big deal. And I think Republicans should really own this, because Democrats, I think, are going around saying it's a tax cut for the rich or whatever, you cut taxes for the rich. It's not. It's small business. I mean, the bigger businesses that own a lot of industrial property still have to pay because they don't meet the exclusion.
Does a $100,000 exemption make a difference to Target? They wouldn't even notice it.
Right.
But your chiropractor down the street, your dentist, your small business, this is important.
And the important thing to remember is Minnesota is one of the few states that actually tax businesses' property this way.
Right.
So, I mean, it's just something that I think they've been trying to get for a long time.
Yes.
I actually, personally, I expected this one to not make it because of this tax cuts for the rich mantra that's been out there. But they stood by it and they kept it. And I think that we should recognize them for that and realize that this has a pretty big impact. Something that they've been looking to do for years. And unfortunately, it may also make it the perfect thing for the governor to veto, because he can then keep with his talking points.
Right. There's also a student loan credit exemption, or student loan credit of $36 million in 2017 and $100 million in the next biennium, in the following 2 years. And this is a credit for eligible individuals that pay for student loans. There's also a college savings plan, additional monies there.
Yeah, credit for people who are saving for 529 savings plans for college.
Dependent care credit of about $10 million during the next year, and another $23 million in the following biennium.
Now these credits, especially the child care credit and the student loan tax credit, some people are complaining that they are redistributive, in the sense that they're giving credits to people that it's not like they're giving them their money back. They're giving them money off their taxes in order to do these things. I don't know. I mean, I think that especially with the student loan issue, it's just very difficult to navigate that politically in any way, to say that we don't care about these people. And I'm sure that there are a number of our folks that say they made the loans, it's their problem. But we've gotten to the point now where this has become a significant drag on the economy. I mean, there was just a study that came out the other day that said that some huge fraction of post-college young people are living at home. And when you get to that point, when, we've got people that can't afford, even now that they're working, a lot of them can't afford to move on with their life. I mean, politically, that's explosive. That's when you start to get the socialism, because these are young people that haven't really thought through like all the ramifications of the things that they want. So I think that these things are dangerous, and they're especially putting in the logic of, a tax credit for basically what you've done, decisions that you made. But at the same time, I can understand why it was something that they decided to give in on the Democrats. The Democrats wanted way more in this area, and the Republicans decided to kind of throw up their hands and say, okay, we'll do some tax relief.
Kudos to Chair Davids in the House, who put this forward, who brought this forward, and he was looking at this. And
the Don't Stop Believin' tax bill, as he called it.
The Taxpayers League supports any credit or any time that we're giving money back. However, when we look at our list of priorities for the session, our number one was give back the surplus to those who were overtaxed.
Yes.
And that is not happening here.
That's not happening here,
It's
unfortunately.
highly unlikely that the students who are getting this credit are the ones who paid the tax. So
Right, although if they're all
so-
living at home, maybe their parents
their
did.
parents are. But anyway, so that is one of our core principles. Is it broad? Does it affect everybody? Well, that's not the case here. And is it giving the money back to the people who paid it in? That is not the case here.
Right.
So while we champion what Chair Davids did with the tax bill and setting up this tax credit for students, anytime we're giving money back, that's good. But that being said, we would like to see it more broad and affecting more people and giving it back to those who paid it in. The second thing that we had was, as far as our priorities for the session, was to phase out the tax on Social Security benefits, which is not in the bill.
No, it's not in the bill. That
And-
was a huge, huge disappointment, but at the same time, we recognize that the governor in particular and key members of the DFL Senate refused to let that go. They did not want to see that happen at all. They looked at it as being a large amount of money that would be taken out of the state's coffers over the future
I
5
heard-
years.
In fact, I heard from a legislator that told me, "Do you realize how expensive that is?"
Yes.
Well, it's expensive because
They're
it's
taking all that
expensive
money
to
from
the
people.
families.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
give me a break.
Right, and I mean, from a symbolic point of view, I think people looking at their retirement, it may not even end up being as much of an impact on individuals as they think, but it's symbolic in the sense that they have to think about, oh, my Social Security, at least I'll have that. Oh, but look, Minnesota's going to take that and use it as if it's taxable, income.
Yes.
So they really need to understand that, and we went through those hearings last year, and it's clear that a lot of folks over there don't understand that. They think of it as a significant revenue source, and that's all they think about it as. They don't realize that people are making decisions, or they don't care that people are making decisions that they're going to leave, and the best part of their retirement is going to be towards the front end of their retirement, as people's start to tap into their retirement income and they have those funds, and that's when they're leaving, because they're looking at this like, oh great, I have another tax hit.
Right. Yeah. So we're actually incentivizing people to leave the state of
Yes.
Minnesota when they could be spending those years and frankly spending their tax dollars in Minnesota. We're giving them an incentive to leave. So the Social Security tax is not in the bill.
No.
On the other hand, we also wanted to see the phase out of the taxes on veterans benefits.
Yes,
And
and-
there was some relief for veterans.
Yes, it's in two places. What they did was, there's always been a veterans credit for low-income veterans, and so that would be your folks that maybe, and also if you've served at all, pretty much, or not very much service, you don't have to have been in for a long time. So that small credit that you qualify for by an income threshold, that one, the threshold was raised and the credit was raised. I think it used to be a $750 credit, now it's a $1,000 credit. And you used to be you have to be poverty level, and now it's like $50,000 income. That's the small one. The big one is the pension exclusion, and that's for folks that actually have more service. That one is for people who are the sort of second career folks. They've been in the military for, maybe their 20-year career. A lot of the military is downsizing, so there are a lot of people that are still in those prime earning years. In their 30s, maybe they joined up when they were a kid and they acquired skills and they acquired, some education, and now they have to retire and they're young. So what do? They go start businesses. They go work in, more senior or middle management positions. Employers love them because they come with a lot of skills and work ethic. But in Minnesota, we have always taxed their pensions. So Minnesota employers have actually said, look, we can't attract these people. They're great people. They come with a lot of benefits and a lot of advantages, and we can't attract them because a lot of other states do not tax their military pensions. So that group is helped by this particular provision. And it's funny because I was having a conversation with a veteran who was looking at the bill, and he only saw the part about the low-income veteran, and he's, they're just giving it to the low-income veterans. It's a tiny credit. No, hardly any more people will qualify. And I said, no, if looking under the exemptions section, and it's like number 10 in the exemption sections of the bill. So anyway, that was something that was fairly large. And I shout out to former candidate for Secretary of State, Dan Severson, who pushed this bill for the longest time, lined up all these employers to testify, many of whom are now no longer in the state, by the way, who moved to other states, to try to get veterans, second career folk into the state. Now Dan is off in another state himself. He retired to Florida, where they don't tax his pension.
Imagine that.
Yeah, and so after long service in Minnesota, both as a legislator and as a candidate and doing various other activism, he is now living elsewhere. But he pushed it, and then it was Representative Detmer that carried it across the threshold in the House, I think.
Yep.
So
on the tax bill, our top three priorities, again, give back the surplus to those who were overtaxed, phase out the taxes on Social Security and veterans benefits. One of those happened, the other one didn't.
Yep.
And third was no more funding for, taxpayer funding for stadiums. And that did not happen.
Right.
There was some tax language for
yeah.
selling beer and things at the stadium for the Minnesota
Well, that was in
United,
the
the
liquor
soccer
bill.
stadium.
That was in the liquor bill, but also they did pass the property exemption for the city of St. Paul to have the Minnesota United soccer team stadium. And the thing that kind of made this a back burner issue was the fact that the land was already not being taxed. It was already off the tax rolls. It had been a
Bus barn.
Bus barn. Most of it had been a bus barn. You know, one of the things that kind of makes me shake my head is that it's one of these situations where they're putting something on the backs of St. Paul taxpayers because their government in the city of St. Paul is clamoring for this. And just the way that they clamored for the CHS stadium, and everybody thinks, oh, this is so great, but then down the road you're going to have costs. Now, it's probable that they've been trying to do something to develop this property for a while, and it's been complicated by a number of factors, which I won't get into. And so, could they have put it back on the tax rolls? Okay, maybe, maybe not. The issue is going to be down the road with the actual stadium. They've exempted the property, or they've exempted the construction materials, which they often do in these kinds of projects. But once again, you're deferring revenue that could have been the state's revenue at that point, and you're deferring, and the city's revenue as well. You've also got costs associated with the stadium, and you've got the Met Council there that's going to be doing transit-oriented development because they've already got the green line going by there.
That evil TOD.
Yes. Well, the problem is that we're only looking at the tip of the iceberg, and we're looking at, oh, it's only this, oh, it's only that. This is already, it's not really a big deal. We weren't getting tax revenue anyway. Well, okay, but so if you're deferring all these possibilities for revenue, eventually you're going to be asking the taxpayers to pony up to fill that gap. And then down the road, there are going to be costs associated with it. CHS has had massive overtime for their police down there because they now, before when they had nothing, they now have a crowd situation which they have to manage. So there are costs associated with these things. And do the benefits outweigh the costs? And do the benefits go to the taxpayer, or do they go to the people that are in that business of whatever it is, whether it's the restaurant and bar owners, or whether it's, the folks that actually own the teams, or where is the money, who's benefiting from this situation and who's paying for it? I think those are all questions that you have to ask anytime you have one of these projects. And behind all the hoopla and, we got to have this, usually it's somebody else that pays down the road, and that somebody else is usually the taxpayer.
Yep. Well, it's not nearly as bad as the as the direct funding that the Vikings see. And
Well, yeah, and that's the other thing.
So,
Yeah.
So this is a better situation than that. We're not
Right.
saying we support it or encourage
No.
it, but on the other hand, and by the way, it is important to understand the background, because they're trying to say that the entire stadium, the entire thing, is being funded privately, and that's
not
the case.
true.
It's not.
That's
it's
not
the
true.
case.
But St. Paul, the city government in St. Paul put their taxpayers on the hook for this.
All right, so the tax bill did pass the House and the Senate and is on the governor's desk. And many are
Dun, dun,
questioning its veto bait. I mean,
Yep.
is this really going to become law or not?
One other thing we should mention that was in the tax bill, that I think also makes it veto bait, is the fact that they killed the indexing of the cigarette tax. So it's
Yes.
not automatically going to go up next year. And that, I think, there was a lot of hysteria on the House floor, at
But
least.
they're calling it a tax decrease.
Yes.
They're saying
A tax
it's
cut.
money,
A tax cut for the tobacco
It's not
companies.
a tax cut. Good Lord. They apply one set of rules if they're trying to raise taxes
Yes.
to minimize it, and they apply another set if they're trying to reduce. It just
Well,
astounds me.
we were opposed to this, and we are the indexing of taxes is particularly pernicious. They started to use indexing in a whole lot of areas as a way to automatically increase your taxes without having to actually ask anybody to do it.
Exactly.
Once they get the indexing in there, and it's pernicious, it's terrible. We've talked at length about how, in this particular case, all it does is drive more illegal sales, out-of-state sales. I mean, it's just ridiculous how much that's expanded over the
Right.
time that we've increased that tax.
Exactly. So there was an index in place that was passed when the Democrats controlled the House and the Senate
Yep.
and the governor. And this removed that indexing. It does not remove or does not reduce the tax. It
No.
reduces the increase in future taxes. That's all this is.
That's right.
And Governor Dayton is upset about it and saying that he's having a problem with it. But the question is whether politically, what's Governor Dayton going to do? Is he going to veto the whole tax bill and throw the whole thing back to the legislature? And call a special session and demand that they start all over again with this, or is he going to sign that bill? And what is going to happen? But stay tuned, because we don't know what is going to happen, and we need to watch. There are some good things in this tax bill that we would like to see happen. There are a few other things we need to dig deeper into it and see what else is there. But that is the status. So let's stay tuned with what's going on with that. On the supplemental spending situation, so remember that we had a $900 million surplus that we were looking at this year, and we were hopeful that that money would be given back to you in tax cuts, tax changes, but some of that was going forward as far as additional spending, which is budget. It's
Right.
a bonding year, we've talked about that 100 times. The Senate DFL majority came forward with a $454 million bill. That had a lot of what the governor was looking for. A lot of the governor's priorities were in there, like that voluntary preschool and things like that, full funding of that. The Republicans in the House, on the other hand, had a total supplemental spending target of 0 initially. So vast differences between the two. In the end, what happened is that there was a House bill for $182 million in new spending. Of that, about $35 million funded the state's broadband initiatives, which the
Right.
governor and others had talked about.
But not as
statewide.
much as the Senate
nearly-
wanted or the governor
Not
wanted.
nearly as much, but
Right.
it is there. $35 million of additional money for broadband.
Right.
And $35 million for racial and economic equity programs.
Yes, well, this was, in response to what happened in my neck of the woods over the occupation of the 4th Precinct and the police shootings. Actually, more national narrative even than state narrative. I mean, we did have an incident like that, but it was fundamentally different in a lot of ways from what has been happening elsewhere.
Exactly.
And so a bunch of people, spearheaded by Senator Bobby Champion, my senator over in North Minneapolis, got together and crafted a laundry list of stuff that they wanted, which were basically a series of grants to nonprofits. And at first the House didn't pick it up at all, and then later on they picked up a few of the things on the list and put them into this bill to get some approval for the bill.
And finally, about $25 million for voluntary pre-K was additionally included in that bill. On the broadband, let's go back and talk about that a little bit. So basically what's happening is businesses and residents in greater Minnesota do not have access to broadband, and because of that, they're not able to build facilities and grow businesses.
And attract businesses too
Yeah.
into the area, because the business is like, well, if I'm going to have problems with my internet, that's not that fast.
It's a core function. It's a core need of business, just like electricity and
Right.
everything else. So very important. But anyway, $35 million there. So,
Yep.
Margaret, I think that we should call that enough for this at this point.
Okay.
We really have kind of covered the 4 major areas. There also were a couple other things, or a few other things that we'll want to talk about in future podcasts, like the Real ID, Sunday liquor sales, caucus versus primary, some of those things that have
Yeah,
happened.
there were a lot of other things. You cannot call this the do nothing session. There were a number of things that happened. Some of them didn't go all the way, but that wasn't for lack of trying. So it's hard to call it, say, do nothing session, like the media had already pre-written the script.
Right, like the DFL had advised.
Advise the media to write the script. Yeah, exactly. So
But really the last thing we wanted to share with you today is that we have a tool that's available to you to utilize to find out what's happening and to continue to stay in touch with the conservative messaging. And that is our affiliate organization called True North.
Yep.
And
Yes, we're a sponsor of True North. It's a long-standing aggregator blog of conservative thought and libertarian thought throughout Minnesota. Not all the commentators agree with each other necessarily, but it's a good slice of what conservatives are thinking across the state. Everybody from national writers like John Hinderaker and Scott Johnson from Powerline and Ed Morrissey from Hot Air aggregate their posts so that you can on True North so that you can see where everybody's at. And there's also a fair number of smaller blogs represented there that talk about local issues, even issues in greater Minnesota. So you don't really get that perspective unless you read a lot of blogs. And True North kind of packages those for you and puts them for you. Plus, there's feeds from Alpha News, the news service that has started up in the last few years, so you can go and check out what's on their front pages. Also, NetRight Daily, which is another sponsor of the blog, has some national news from Americans for Limited Government. The radio shows, the local radio shows that are conservative talk oriented, the podcasts that you may interest you, like the guys, got to give them a shout out, the Jack and Jake of Action for Liberty and Tea Party Alliance. They have a podcast called Living Free, which they've given us a shout out a couple times too. And so that blog is also fed into True North. So when they have a new podcast, usually it makes it up there pretty quick. Bob Davis has been a podcaster for a while, used to be on KSTP. There's a link to his podcast. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop for every conservative based in Minnesota who, what they're saying at this moment. And like I said, they might not all agree, but it's a really good picture of kind of what people are thinking.
Well, it's so this is the news accumulator. This is the information accumulator. If you're a conservative in Minnesota, this is the go-to source for information and where to connect with all of these different sites and what's happening in media, what's happening in social media across the web.
On the conservative side. So if you're complaining that your Facebook feed has all left-wing stuff in it, go check out True North, which also actually has a Facebook page as well, and the posts are reposted on Facebook as well. So if you're not a blog reader, if you're a Facebook person, you can certainly read those posts on True North as well.
But a lot of us are fed up with the local media, their coverage of conservative principles in what is happening in politics, and we feel we don't have a place to turn. Well, True North is one of those places to turn. And again, we're posting content that is up across the web. This is a good go-to place to start your process. Go look for your news, and then you can spread out from there, spider out from there to find out the ones that you really like. So we really would encourage you to go to www.looktruenorth.com and put that on your favorites, put it on your at the top of your pages, and look for that, and let's start our searches for news and information about conservative politics in Minnesota on looktruenorth.com. Also, again, please look at taxpayersleague.org, our website. We have a lot of information there. We would love your support and encouragement. Like us on Facebook. Tell your friends and family about our information, about our podcasts, and thank you for joining us. We will be having podcasts continue throughout the summer, throughout this time. We are concerned about a special session. If that is the case, you can always look to our podcast for information about what is happening. All right, well, have a great summer. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, and have a safe Memorial Day weekend.
And thank you to our military folks who have supported us.
Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. I'm coming home.